Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, warshippers of all ages, welcome back to YouTube. My name is SeaRaptor, and it is a long past time we continue our Learn to Play series for the Italian destroyer line. Let's take a look at Tier 6's Aviere. I have been sadly neglecting this series of videos over the last few months. A whole variety of reasons, won't go into it, but the bottom line is, we're back. I now actually have all of the gameplay that I need out of these ships, at least the 6, 7, and 8, to get caught up and kind of keep momentum going again, or at least get momentum built up again. So we're going to get those out over the next few weeks, starting here at Tier 6. And it's fortuitous, right? Because not long after I made the Tier 5 video last fall, Wargaming came through with a series of minor buffs to these ships. Nothing significant, but they did make it just a little easier, a little less painful to use the consumables. And the consumables are actually really key to how you play these ships and what kind of performance you get out of them. So, Aviere is very similar to Maestrale. The playstyle is very similar. There's a couple of differences. We'll hit those along the way. But let's take a spin around the ship. We'll talk about, compare her to some of her contemporaries, and we'll talk a little bit about the kinds of targets you should be focusing on when you're behind the helm of this ship. All right, Aviere, here we go. As we do, kicking off with survivability, you see there's 17,250 on the HP pool. That is with Survivability Expert and the fancy flag. That is max HP that you can get out of this ship. Base health, I think, is about 14,500. Yeah, 14,300. That's towards the high end of Tier 6, but it's not best in tier. Gepard is still better. You're tied with the new French Tier 6 destroyer Duchafault. You're a slight bit ahead of Fushun and a slight bit ahead of Nevny, and still behind the Germans over there with Ernst Gade. But you're ahead of everybody else. So you're in the running for one of the higher health destroyers in your tier. Not necessarily your matchmaking bracket. That's a different conversation. But this is good, right? Because as we've talked about with Maestrale, the big thing that Aviere wants to be doing is bullying other destroyers. She wants to be fighting over cap circles. She wants to be aggressively hunting other destroyers or light units, submarines even, and trying to put them on the bottom of the ocean. That is what she's best at. So this health pool is complementary to that, and you want to be doing everything you can to maximize your health pool. That means Survivability Expert on the captain. That means the new flag that gives you an extra health point bonus, and you want to be doing everything you can to guard your health, protect your health, not give it up stupidly in the early going of a game, because you are going to be a big player in the mid to late game as a game develops. So hit points, definitely, you're not best in tier, but it's definitely an asset of this ship, one of her strong suits. Talking about armor, you're a destroyer. You don't got any armor. You could be kidding me, right? 16 mils throughout. You will get full pinned by everything. Like, even the little 120mm European pop guns you'll run into down here at Tier 6 will still full pin you. Your armor will do nothing. Well, will do very little for you. I won't say nothing, but it will do very little for you. Don't count on it doing anything massively interesting. Maneuverability and concealment. Max speed here with a speed flag. Basically the next best thing to 40 knots. 39.9, might as well call it 40. Your base speed is 38. That is on the high end of the tier. You're tied with Vesteris, Nevny, Fushun, those three at plus 3 plus Aviere, Duchafault, the new Frenchie. All of those at 38 knots. So you are basically tied for best in tier speed, and that is excellent. Remember, we talked about what do you really want to be doing with the ship? You want to be aggressively hunting and murdering other destroyers. You can't do that without speed, and let me tell you something, in an Italian boat, speed is not a problem. 570 on the turning circle is fairly average. Most of the turning circles in this tier are in the high 500 meter, low 600 meter range. The outliers are like the Germans that close to 700 meters, but you don't handle nearly that bad. Again, as we've mentioned, you are Italian. You handle very well. 3.6 on the rudder shift, also very good. Again, not best in tier, but fairly average, but believe me, the ship handles very well. It's difficult to quantify with numbers. I said this with Maestrale. I'm going to say it probably every time we talk about this quality on the Italian ships. Go drive an Italian ship. Tier 6 is cheap. Tier 5 is cheap. You can pick up one of these. Try it out. Then go compare it to something else. Come compare it to one of those German destroyers. Watch how much better this thing handles. It's crazy. The overall length, the speed, the lines, the handling. Italian ships handle like sports cars, and Aviere is absolutely a rock star in this department. Full concealment build on this ship is 6.4 kilometers. That is not amazing, but hilariously, given the tier you're in and tech tree ships you're up against, this is not bad. Now, it is on the low side. Basically, Tier 6 tech tree ships vary from 5.8 on the low end, that's Hatsuharu, all the way up to a little over 6.5, which is Gepard over in the French tree. You're on the high end of that. But you're not so far out of whack in terms of concealment that it really feels like a disadvantage, okay? You will generally not be the stealthiest thing in a game. But, again, the role you're trying to fill, the speed you have, your gun bloom, your fancy smoke, all of these things combined can help you make the make up for that gap a little bit. Let's put it that way. So not the stealthiest thing on the ocean, but 6.4 is plenty of detection to be working with for the role you are meant to fill. Main battery. Aviere's main battery is comprised of the same 120mm 50 caliber Italian barreled guns you had down at Tier 5, except now you've got a double up forward, a double back aft. That should be familiar. Now you're adding this little single barrel midship. So I go from 4 barrels down at Tier 5 to 5 barrels here at Tier 6. So the reload, I think, is actually a little better. This says 7.1 on the reload. Why does that? Let's see. Where am I? Oof, that does not jive with what I'm showing in my sheet. They must have slowed these down somewhere along the way. Let's go have a quick look. Let me filter the Tier 5 boats in here and have a look at Maestrale. I feel like it's an improvement over Maestrale. Man, I don't know. That says 5.8. I don't trust this thing anymore. Either way, 7.1 feels bad, right? Your reload is not going to be all that amazing. The good news is that when you have really, really good dispersion, you see there's 67 meters. That is very, very good. You're going to put almost all of your shells on target every single time you pull the trigger. And if you're firing the SAP in an opposing destroyer, he's going to feel it, right? 5-6 of these shells going down range. Full pins should be, let's see, 2850. What is that? 2850, and a full pin is a third of that, right? So divided by 3, 950. Yeah, so a full, if you can manage to hit all 5 shells, you'll be slapping another destroyer for 5k a salvo, assuming those are full pins and not ricochets. He's going to feel that, right? Like every other destroyer in your tier for certain is going to feel it. Most destroyers in your matchmaking bracket for sure are going to feel it. If you're able to catch an opposing destroyer out, some destroyers you will be able to kill in 3 to 4 salvos. Now that's almost 30 seconds of combat. That's a long time in combat. But the bottom line is that you are a threat that they have to respect. And a smart destroyer player on the other team who understands the role of an Italian destroyer will try to avoid you. It's your job to not give him that opportunity. So the main battery reload does feel like a bit of a bad. Now, let's talk about main battery range. One of the big disadvantages, and we talked about this at Maestrale, of all of these Italian ships, at least most of them here in the middle tiers on up to about Tier 8, the main battery range feels terrible. It feels artificially deflated. This feels like a negative. It isn't. Here's why. If you are fighting an opposing destroyer, let's just say you're fighting an opposing destroyer at 6.5 kilometers, right? Aviere here, I've got it set for a 6.9 kilometer main battery range. Remember, I only have 6.4 detection on concealment. Okay, so as soon as I'm spotted, they're in my gun range, but it's not possible for them to spot you and be outside your gun range. This is important. This is why you have to kind of think about these things when you're configuring the ship. But the goal here is if you're able to murder the thing that's spotting you, your gun bloom is small enough that usually, as soon as the opposing ship that's spotting you is dead, you're invisible. You disappear. Unless there are 2 ships at that range spotting you, in which case you have bit more problems. But if there's only one, if you're in a one-on-one gunfight with an opposing destroyer, you need to kill him or drive him off as quick as you can. Once you do that, no one else on that team can spot you, and the incoming fire will stop, right? So this is a key thing, and you'll see me, a sample game later, you'll see me manage this a lot. This gun range looks like a negative. It isn't. We'll talk about it more when we get to loadouts, but don't necessarily, I wouldn't do it here at Tier 6, okay? But there are times, as you're working up these ships, that you may want to consider not upgrading the guns. I'll give you an example. Right now, I can get my detection down to 6.4. I can get my gun bloom, my gun range to 6.3. Having these 2 numbers be very, very close, in fact, having these 2 numbers be the same, would almost be ideal, wouldn't it? Because then, if you're spotted, they're in your gun range. As it is, it works okay here if I go ahead and use the gun range upgrade, because again, if I'm spotted, they're in my gun range. But the goal is to keep that gun bloom as small as possible while still being able to fire at least inside your detection range. The reason this feels bad is when you first start equipping an Italian destroyer, right, without Concealment Expert and some of the other commander skills and the range buff and all the rest of this stuff, your gun range will be smaller than your detection radius. And that feels terrible. So when you're first fitting out an Italian destroyer, find a way to fix that, right? We'll talk more about this when we get to builds, but the reality is you want to try and get rid of that as quickly as you can. Now, we've talked a lot about the SAP. We haven't talked a lot about the HE. The HE is perfectly serviceable. It's not best in tier. It's not amazing. It's not going to break any records. These are 120 millimeter guns, so these are going to feel similar to the little European destroyer pop shells, right? They don't hit that hard. But when an opposing destroyer goes bow or stern onto you, this is what you want to be firing. Swap to the HE. Put the HE downrange. The SAP will not do good work unless it can bite in and get full penetrations. It will ricochet at steep angles and zero damage ricochet. Some damage out of the HE, even if it's crap damage, is still better than nothing out of the SAP. Okay, so the SAP is what you want to be firing when they're broadside on or angled or turning away from you and that kinds of things. But as they get narrow again, swap back to the HE and try to get some work out of that. The main battery is a little tricky, but you've got to figure this out, right? Figure it out here at Tier 5 and Tier 6, because once you do, the Tier 7 and Tier 8 games will be significantly better. Torpedoes. This is, again, something that Aviere does not do well, right? You have 8-kilometer torpedoes. That's nice. They're at least longer than your detection range. The problem is they are painfully slow at 56 knots, and at only 10,000 alpha damage, they really don't hit that hard. So Aviere is one of these destroyers. Maestrale is like this. I think, honestly, I would say this about almost all the Italian destroyers until you maybe get to the top end of the line. You will not be breaking any damage records. Your impact in a game is not going to come from how much damage you put out. It's going to come from where that damage goes, what targets you apply it to. In other words, are you shooting at the right things? Are you trying to kill opposing destroyers? And then as you do, you want to be using that advantage to take over capture areas and zones of the map, right? Aviere, all the Italian destroyers, really, they're really good boats in domination modes. They can be good boats in arms race. They are at a disadvantage, in my opinion, in standard battles. Not because they're bad, but because their main kind of reason for being, which is, killing other destroyers, fighting over capture zones, that sort of thing, doesn't exist in standard mode. At least in arms race, I have objectives to be fighting over. Opposing destroyers will close with me. I can possibly just use my smoke, and if I don't want to get in a gunfight, I can just use my speedy smoke and blaze through one undetected and pick up a buff, that kind of thing. So you have some neat tools you can use in an arms race mode. But in standard battles, these ships feel a little rough, okay? So you're not going to be breaking a lot of damage records, and these torpedoes are part of the problem. You have to be making sure you're going to be applying that damage to the right targets. Now, these torpedoes are workable, right? That 1.1 detection on that 56 knots of speed means that your opponents only have about a little over 7 seconds of reaction time. So that's nice. If you throw these at a battleship, you'll probably hit a couple. But they won't hit that hard, right? That's the trick, is that the opposing battleship will take 8,000 damage all in. If you hit him, let's say you hit him with 2 torpedoes, he'll probably take about 5,000 damage a torpedo. You might land a flood. He's going to, that sucked. Pop a heal, and probably keep moving. Not much you can do about it. It is what it is. The torpedoes do get better, okay? One more thing I want to point out here while we're talking about torpedoes. As you move up the line, you'll hear people talk about using the smoke to charge an opposing battleship or stationary target and get to point-blank range and hit them with all your torpedoes. You can do that. You can do that starting at Tier 5 at Maestrale. You can do that here at Tier 6 with Aviere and on up the line. But the thing you've got to remember, particularly here at Tier 6, these torpedoes do not hit that hard. Remember this. If you're going to make that kind of a risk, if you're going to gamble your entire ship that you can kill an opposing stationary battleship that's 4 or 5 kilometers away, you're going to pop your fancy smoke and charge him, he better be at like half health, right? He better have 15 to 20,000 hit points. That's a target you probably can kill that way. But if he has more than, let's say he has 30,000 hit points, you may not kill him, right? You may not kill him. That's a risk. That's a big risk. If he has more than 30,000 hit points, I can almost guarantee you that you won't kill him. So just Gauge your target appropriately. If you want to make a crazy torpedo charge, do it against a target that is fairly low health. Depth charges. You've got 2 sticks of 10, 3,200 damage a pop. These are nice These are nice depth charges. They do really good work against submarines. These are kind of the middling of the damage brackets. If you've heard me talk about depth charges in other videos about other destroyers, you know that the Americans, the British, and the Japanese all have the hardest hitting torpedo depth charges in the game. They all hit for about 5,000 a pop on the alpha side. That as you come down, there's like a middle tier, right? A middle tier of nations that includes the French and the Italians that hit for this 3,200, 3,500-ish damage, right? And then as you go on down, there's like a lower tier, the Russians, the Germans, the Europeans, the Pan-Asians that all hit around the low, like around 2,000, maybe 2,300, down to even as low as 1,700, 1,800 for some of the Pan-Asian destroyers. So you're right in the middle. That's perfectly workable, right? Especially against a Tier 6 destroyer, submarine. Against a Tier 6 submarine, you've got exactly the tools you need. You'll be fine. Okay. Your crawling smoke also possibly allows you to charge an out of position submarine and destroy him and depth charge the crap out of him without getting spotted. That's a nice feeling. Okay, so keep that in mind. You have good enough depth charges and a unique consumable that allows you to punish cheeky submarines when you get the opportunity. AA defense is not something you do well at all. It's generally, across all Italian ships, you're bad at this. You're just terrible at it. You have some kind of mid-range AA here. You'll be able to shoot down the stationary fighters that get dropped over your head. But when an opposing carrier is trying to drop ordnance on you, you are not going to deter him, nor will you shoot down many of his actual attack planes. Keep your AA turned off as much as possible. Only turn it on when you're actually under aerial attack or being spotted by a plane that you can shoot down. Period. End of discussion. Otherwise, just leave it off. Don't waste your time with it. Upgrades. Slot 1, you're pretty much going to want main armaments mod. Damage control and auxiliary are not going to do you a whole lot. In slot 2, you've got 2 good options here. If you have the coal to spend on engine boost, I highly encourage it. The engine boost consumable on Italian destroyers is very, very, very good, but this costs coal. Not everybody has a lot of coal. If you don't have it, engine room protection, perfectly serviceable. Spend some credits, pick this one up. You've got a couple of options here at slot 3. I'm using turret traverse. I would not spend anything on A. Don't worry about this. The torpedo tubes is not amazing. The torpedoes just aren't going to do enough work for you to, I think, investing a module in it is or an upgrade is worth it. The other thing you could be considering is aiming systems, right? We talked about how your guns are pretty accurate. This tightens that up a little bit. So to me, this is kind of a personal choice. You're going to spend enough time at, frankly, knife fighting range of other destroyers that I think the turret traverse is far and away the best option. You may disagree. You would much rather have the aiming system mod. I think either one is totally viable. Slot 4 here, you pretty much don't need the steering gears. I think propulsion is the way to go. However, sometimes if you find yourself, like you only have 2 sticks of depth charges, you have plenty of bombs in them, but if you feel compelled to take the depth charges mod, this is not the worst thing that you can be investing here, okay? So yeah, that's what I would do there. Flags are fairly straightforward. The new health flag, Charlie Kilo, has taken the place of the old detonation prevention flag, Juliet Charlie. Highly, highly, highly recommend these flags. The extra 5% health sometimes can make a big difference in the quality and the XP you get out of a destroyer game. Victor Lima, India X-Ray, and Juliet Whiskey Uni-1 are just trying to maximize any or all of your damage over time effects. India X-Ray is debatable, right? You're going to be firing your SAP most of the time. Trying to maximize your flood chance is a good idea, but trying to maximize your fire chance may not necessarily pay many returns, so don't sweat that if it doesn't happen. X-Ray Papa Uni-1, big flag for you, right? Increasing the length of time you can be hidden in your exhaust smoke is a big deal. Highly encourage this one. November Foxtrot, similar thing. Your extra consumables here, getting those cooldowns back quicker, an excellent pickup. And of course, Sierra Mike for the extra speed takes you from 38 knots to basically the next best thing to 40 just for equipping the flag. Now let's talk real quick about your consumables. You don't get choices here. You're going to get exhaust and you're going to get the emergency speed boost. The exhaust smoke, playing Maestrale or playing any of the Italian cruisers, you ought to be used to this by now. You pop this smoke, it conceals you at full speed This thing, of course, lasts nearly 30 seconds. And what they've done is they've reduced the cooldown on this. So now with the buffs and everything, you can get this down to a little under 90 seconds. That's nice. Now, you only have 3 charges. You could, and we'll talk about this in a minute, you could pick up Superintendent for an extra charge. It's not a bad idea, okay? It's not a bad idea. You will find really, really neat ways to use this smoke. One of the best things I love about these destroyers is that the smoke is one of the most unique tactical tools that they have, and there's some easy, obvious uses for it, but it's you will find as you're playing the game, you're like, oh, I can smoke up and move from here to here and not be spotted. You'll find really neat, creative ways to use it while you're playing. So having as much duration as you can get out of it is a really, really good thing. Same thing goes for your emergency engine boost, right? You see that it only lasts for 26 seconds, but it takes this ship up to basically 50 knots while it's engaged. So you're basically for 30 seconds, and then it's got about, what is that, about 2.5 minute cooldown. So 30 seconds up, 2.5 minutes down, you're moving 40 knots, moving 40 knots. Now I can move 50 knots for 30 seconds, and then it falls back off. The nice thing also is that with this particular set of mixes, this engine boost and this smoke last almost the exact same amount of time, right? 26, 27 seconds. So earlier we were talking about torpedo charges, right? Being able to smoke up, speed boost, and push up on against a slow-moving or stationary target and just dump all your torpedoes into something at point-blank range. If you have these available, that is a valid tactic. That tactic sort of came about because of an Italian premium destroyer up at the top end of the Tier 9, right? Paolo Emilio. Here in the middle tiers, it is a viable tactic. But again, don't try it against full health battleships. You will regret your life choices. Captain skills are fairly straightforward. I recommend the same 4 that I always like recommending here. You're talking about preventive maintenance, last stand, survivability expert, and concealment expert. Okay, to me, those should be the first 10 points in any build for an Aviere captain. After that, you have some options. I would encourage you to pick up Adrenaline Rush. You will get damaged in this ship. You will get shot at. You will absolutely get value out of this skill. Grease the Gears for 1 point. Again, to me, this is a no-brainer, right? By the time you stack Grease the Gears and the module, you can get your turret traverse down a little under 10 seconds for a 180. That means that when I'm at close range brawling other things, and I will always be at close range if I'm firing my guns because the ship does not have much gun range, right? You will highly value and be glad you have that turret traverse. You see here, I have Fearless Brawler for extra main battery reload when I am spotted. I am a big fan of this. You may not be. That's fine. But very commonly, I find myself getting a lot of value out of the skill, so that's where I've dumped 4 points. You could also consider Main Battery AA Specialist just for the straight 5% buff to your gun reload. You will not get much out of the AA portion of this skill, which is why I've taken Fearless Brawler instead. But hey, if this works for you, you do you. As we noted, Superintendent, an extra charge of each of your consumables can be a big, big deal. So if that's what you want, go for it. Similar, Consumables Enhancement. More duration out of your smoke and engine boost. Also a great place to spend 2 points. So you have lots of good options in here. Personally, I would not invest anything in the torpedoes, nor would I invest in Demolition Expert. Okay? I think you need to be focusing on the utility you're going to get out of your consumables, Superintendent, Consumables Enhancements, Consumable Specialist if you want even faster cooldowns. Like all 3 of those would be excellent skills for Aviere that I have not picked up here. But you do you. That's my recommendations. You build the ship the way you want to play it. All right, let's go look at some sample gameplay here. I had a pretty solid game in Aviere, and I want to be able to show it to you off to you guys. We'll come back here in a few minutes, and we'll do some outro. All right, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to our little sample game here in Tier 6 Italian destroyer Aviere. Spawning into the south side of Neighbors, I am immediately disappointed because this is a standard battle. Remember mentioning earlier that Italian destroyers are maybe not really necessarily built for standard battle, but this game is going to make me eat my own words. Now, some of that is going to come down to how aggressively some of the opposing destroyers play, and we're able to position ourselves smartly and punish them for those plays. But also, it's going to come down to the fact that there are simply a lot of targets. This is a target-rich environment for Aviere. Look at this matchmaking. Six destroyers and submarines on each team. 5 destroyers and a sub. This is exactly the kind of matchmaking that a ship like Aviere can thrive in. Here's the trick. you don't want to be off by yourself, right? You want to be near friends. You want to find other people to help you achieve your goals. Yes, I realize in World of Warships, team play is dead. That is an exaggeration, of course. But the bottom line is that even having other people around for opponents to shoot at that aren't you sometimes is a good idea. So we're going to start off here by deciding, I'm looking at the minimap thinking, oh, I was eventually going to go over to the 3-4 line, but I saw the Hatsu and the U-69 headed that way, and I said, you know what? I'm going to go back up this Luca Tarigo, who's very obviously going mid for a reason. This way, he's not going alone, so I'm going to go with him, and sure enough, he runs into an enemy Mahan up here. Now, of course, the Mahan, well outside my gun range. This is one of those instances where, gosh, you could wish for a little more gun range out of your Italian destroyer. But it's, again, for a ship that wants to preserve its health early, we're doing well. And you see there the Tarigo trading very well with that Mahan. That Mahan already down to about half HP. Our Tarigo basically taking nothing more than a little bit of chip damage. I'm going to move up here and chuck some torpedoes into that smoke on the possible off chance that our buddy the Mahan decides to sit in there, or one of his teammates decides to move up into that smoke, somebody like that Boise behind him. I'm not going to get anything out of those torpedoes, but that's the thought process behind that salvo. So, since he has now broken to the east, going into the island chain up to the north-northeast, I'm going to decide I'm going to head out here to the southwest and play with the Hatsu, the U-69, and this little island group out this way. And who do I find but the opposing Luca Tarigo? Now, I'm going to pause here for a moment. This is not a gunfight I'm excited about, right? If you look at our health pools, he has 17.5, I'm 16.4. I have a small disadvantage, but he has one more barrel. He can hit harder than I can. He has 6 barrels to my 5. He has the exact same Italian SAP. He's me, just a little better, right? So I don't want to pick this fight, especially since if you look at the minimap, I may not necessarily get the support that I need. So I'm going to turn immediately hard to the south. I'm going to try to stay outside of my spotting range, and I do succeed here. Now, what I'm trying to do here is play throttle games to keep him spotted and discourage him from pushing any further in this general direction. I do go ahead and pop the speed boost, which ends up actually kind of pushing me outside of his detection range. I'm actually going to now kind of cut back to the west. I'm trying to keep him spotted in the hopes that one of my teammates will soften him up for me a little bit before I open fire. This is not going to happen, so to hell with it. Let's get in on this action here. Start in with the SAP for a nice little opening salvo there, about 1800 HP. The Rook or the Fuso chimes in. They get a little bit of chip damage. And he's trying to get away from me. He's right at the extreme edge of my range. That's why I'm not firing right here. Those shells probably won't go far enough. But if you notice how he's conning his ship, he's about to T-bone into the island. So what's going to happen is he's going to like, oh crap, and then rather than stand there while he gets turned around and shot at while doing it, he's going to go ahead and pop his smoke so he can maneuver through here and hopefully not get dead. Now, I'm vomiting my torpedoes off to the starboard side of that smoke. What I'm expecting him to do is back off the island, maneuver, and then move north up the 4 line. So I'm trying to lead my torpedoes out there to my starboard. The struggle is that these torpedoes are so slow by the time they're even in the range of where they might be able to hit him. He's long gone because he's a Italian destroyer. He moves pretty quick. The interesting thing is there's more targets over here than just my buddy, the Luca Tarigo, right? Up in front of me, there's a Farragut who's been playing tag with both the Hatsuharu and this U-69. In fact, my U-69 is probably in a bit of a pickle. He may get dunked here in a moment. He's about to get driven over by that Farragut. I'm waiting for my Tarigo buddy to show up. There he is. So, all right, fine. We had the HE in the barrel because the last shot he was showing me was the stern shot. We'll switch back to the SAP and try to get some damage. Now, lucky for me, this guy's aim is really, really, really bad. He's consistently behind me as my team goes down 3 ships right here. Check it out. Doesn't feel very good. We know his smoke is offline, so I can just keep hammering this guy. Gonna hit him with some SAP there. Gonna hit him with some HE here. But as the Gneisenau rounds the corner, the New Mexico's right in front of me, the Tarigo, the Farragut off my bow, I'm like, you know what? I do not want to sit in here and be in a 4-on-1. Now, the Farragut is about to bite it. I'm going to try and get some shells on him, but the Hatsuharu is going to clean him up. And the Gneisenau is deciding to bail out to the north as well. I'm going to get a couple more chip shots here in on this New Mexico, and then we're simply going to back off a bit. So, early engagements. What's been happening? How have I been doing? I've been trading well. I've done 12,000 damage or so. I've received a little less than 2,000 in exchange. This is the kind of thing you want to be trying to engineer in a Luca Tarigo, or in Aviere, or in any Italian destroyer, right? Certainly these middle tier ones, the 5 through 8, they're all gonna have very, very similar play styles. You want to be trying to protect your health early. Do not be afraid to use those smokes in the early game to defend your health as best you can, especially when you have other friendly ships around who can spot the thing you're shooting at for you. If you can look at the minimap and see, hey, I can smoke here and get these shots for free, you should probably be doing it if it's before the 10-minute mark in a game. Now, I'm trying not to go around the island here, let that New Mexico spot me when I discover the opposing Luca still being a little cheeky out here, isn't he? Look at him. He's trying to get to our cap. Okay, well, then we're going to definitely chase him, right? We'll pop a speed boost, close the gap here. He's headed out towards mid. Going to keep him spotted and try and keep him under fire. I'm hoping I'll get a little bit of help from the New Mexico, maybe. Oop. A little bit of navigational error there. Could have handled that turn better and probably not slowed down, which would have been beneficial. He's going to end up smoking. When he does, notice he has no one else on his team who could spot me because my gun bloom is so small. We're still 2 ships down, but they have several ships who are very, very low, including that Mahan from earlier. And, of course, now he's trying to get down here as well. Interesting. So they have 2 destroyers trying to run for the cap very, very early here. And, hey, I move 40 knots on the surface even without my speed boost. I'm not afraid to go back and fight these guys. The 2 of them combined have less health than I do. The Mahan can still be a threat simply because, well, his guns fire a lot faster than mine. But we'll see how this goes. Now, you can see that the smoke out there is well inside my detection bubble. If, for some reason, one of those guys were to pop out of the smoke, we would spot each other almost right away. So, at the moment, they're either sitting in the smoke or they've turned and they've pushed to the east, behind the smoke. Somebody's now in the cap. My first thought was that this was the cachalot, the opposing submarine. Nobody's spotted him. He hasn't even been picked up the entire game, and I thought, that guy must have just sailed straight through the middle of the map and just done his thing. No torpedo hits on the Mahan. Very sad. But we're going to have to turn into this cap and play defense here. Go figure out who it is. I'm still waiting for this. I've got my guns here. I'm waiting for this Mahan to pop out of this smoke. I'm just kind of salivating. At this point, I'm waiting for the torpedoes to reload. They're going to go back in this smoke because I think he's still in there. And who do we find in the smoke? In the cap, but our buddy, the Luca Tarigo. Oh, hey, I know just what to do with you. We'll get a little bit of reset here. He's not going to cap. In fact, he's going to die as soon as I put enough shells on target. Just like that. Now, I'm convinced this Mahan is still up here in this smoke. I don't think he left. So I'm going to turn back, and we're going to move up the 7 line here. Continue to play a little defense and just get between him and the cap circle and wait for him to show up. This Ashitaka to off my port quarter here, backing me up a little bit, gives me a nice warm, fuzzy feeling that if I need extra help, I have it. As the team has managed to now go up a ship, we've had 4 straight unanswered kills here after going down 3 ships in the early going. Where are you, Mr. Mahan? I know you're here. I'm waiting for this. His smoke has to expire sooner or later. I keep assuming, anyway. Come on. There he is. There she is. Not so wounded as we were led to believe. No, actually, she's just about as dead as we thought. A couple of salvos going to finish this guy up. And then now... All right, so now let's with a 2-ship lead and a point lead, let's look at the strategic situation, right? There are only 2 really good targets left for me to be trying to hit. That's the surviving Mahan, who you can look at the minimap and see he was last spotted in C9, and the submarine, the opposing submarine, who literally no one has ever spotted once, or at least doesn't seem to. Our right flank, as it were, the Sims and Scharnhorst, very, very weak. In fact, that Scharnhorst is on the verge of death, and there's no way the Sims is going to hold back this push coming down the 8-9 line. So I'm going to go over here and back these guys up, either whether it's for spotting or something else. I just want to be over here in this general vicinity so I can be useful and give this Sims a helping hand. Now, as it turns out, in a minute, The Scharnhorst is going to bite it. He's, you know, a few shells from death here. And I'm going to end up racking up some nice spotting damage for my buddy here, the Sims, because he's going to lose his buddy, the Scharnhorst, doing that spotting.
La nostra squadra è in vantaggio.
Scharnhorst does manage to cling to life here for a brief time on about 360 HP. I think eventually, or sorry, 304, there he is. I think eventually the QE rounds the corner and gets enough shells into him and puts him out. Okay, aha, there we go. So now, for the first time this game, we have the opposing Cachalot has been spotted. He's a 6'2 detection, I'm a 6'4. The Mahan last spotted playing behind him. So this is a guy that doesn't frighten me over much. Might as well put some shells down range on him, get the free damage I can. He's actually taking some depth charge damage, which is noteworthy. Scharnhorst secondary is getting in on him there. But notice, watch. He and I were spotting each other, but as soon as he dives, my gun bloom is only 6'9". I am invisible again. This is the advantage of the Italian destroyer line here in the middle tiers. You want to keep that gun bloom as small as you can for exactly these kinds of instances. You will pop into detection, they'll get 2 salvos downrange, that submarine he has to bail, get off the surface, and bam, suddenly I am invisible again because the Mahan and the Queen Elizabeth are 9 kilometers away. So just like that, they lose their shots. But I know he's up here somewhere, headed to the west. I'm considering torpedo salvos on this QE, but I think now that he realizes the Sims and I are here, he wants no part of this shenanigans. Besides, this Mahan is moving up. This is a much more important engagement for me. I need to be focused on this. So now, talk about this engagement. See the Sims? The Sims is behind me. He is clearly spotting this Mahan for me. Now is the perfect opportunity to use a smoke and get these shots for free. And that's exactly what we're going to do. Now, when I'm in the smoke, I'm not getting Fearless Brawler, but I'm also not taking damage. I need to build a health advantage against this Mahan, right? Right now, we're about parity. Now you see there, we're starting to build a health advantage. He's at 8k, I'm at 12.2. We're going to put some more damage into him. Not as much as I would have liked there, so on and so forth. We're going to swap to the HE here in a moment. There we go. So for my smoke, we cut about 6,000 HP off of that guy. Now I have a 2-to-1 advantage in health as this gunfight continues. That's the benefit of using someone else for a smotter and popping your smoke. That's why you do it. Now this Mahan still has significantly, like, double my rate of fire, I think. So this is not a gunfight that I'm excited about prolonging. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn away to open the range while continuing to trade shots with this guy. And eventually at 6'9", I'm going to drop off his detection. As it is, he decides he wants out of this fight. He goes ahead and smokes up. Now the Cachalot is still somewhere over here off my bow to the west, between the Sims and I. If he's smart, he's retreating back along the 8 line to try and get in behind that Queen Elizabeth for a little bit of protection. But the Mahan off my starboard side in smoke, not a concern right now. Now, oh, hello, and there he is. Cachalot's battery is getting low. He pops to the surface for a look around. He discovers that me almost on top of him and the Sims running the other way. Let's see if the Ashitaka gets his depth charges in on the action. Again, look at this. I took a pot shot at the Cachalot. He had to dive. When he dove, the Mahan, who was on my starboard side, who's less than 8 kilometers away, can no longer see me. Gun bloom size matters. It matters. The oil slick tells me where the Cachalot is, or at least approximately where he is. Mahan torpedoes coming in, but I can work my way around those. See, right now, in almost any other destroyer, the Mahan would be shooting the bejesus out of me. But he can't, because I'm invisible, until his buddy, the Cachalot right here, shows up right next to me, trying to run the other way. I've got this guy dead to rights between the guns. Between the guns and the depth charges, he's out. And now, with a 6'9" gun bloom, the Mahan has me on the surface. But for some reason, he's firing AP. I don't know why. Easy. Show the man my bow. I'm not concerned about these shells at all. Put the SAP back in the barrel. I don't get much out of that salvo. Okay. So now, if it weren't for this island, the gunfight would have continued. Of course, now the island has broken line of sight. Now I have to figure out how I want to play this engagement. One of the things that I like to do in these instances where I disappear behind an island is reverse course, right? the Mahan is probably expecting me to keep chasing the Queen Elizabeth or keep moving to the west. What I'm going to do, partly because it keeps me away from the Kiwi's guns, and partly because I don't think the Mahan's going to expect it, I'm going to use this island and turn to starboard and come right up the 8-9 line over here around the starboard side of this island to put shells down on the Mahan, who almost certainly, when I come around this island, will be spotted on the surface. I just don't believe he has the speed to get away from me. And I don't think his smoke is available because he just used it not long ago. We'll know shortly. His torpedoes coming at me, but his torpedoes are slow, and there he is at 5 clicks. And again, that earlier health advantage I built, still valid here. I still have a 2-to-1 health advantage going into this engagement. This is exactly the kind of gun engagement that an Italian destroyer wants to look for on the surface. You have a health advantage, you have the harder hitting shells, you want to get in here and clean up a target. Put it down. You're not doing big damage, but you're gonna deal the fatal damage and get the kill. And in this instance, getting that final damage in and getting the kill ends the game. So, Aviere all over the map on this game, from the extreme left flank to the extreme right flank. Not a big damage game. This is a consistent theme you're going to see with these ships. You will probably not rake in a pile of damage. That's okay. Don't let that freak you out, because with 4 kills and a handful of defense ribbons, this is easily a solid 1800 base XP game for me, right? This is only a tier 6-7 game. This is very fair matchmaking for a tier 6 boat, and we performed very well cleaning up a whole bunch of light units on the opposing team. We got almost all of that opposing Torigo's HP. We got a notable chunk of the Mahans, plus the kills on both of those. We took a big chunk of the Cachalot's HP and got that kill, and we cleaned up that Mahan early from very early of the game that my friendly Luca Torigo took about half his HP away. We're the ones that secured the kill on him. And then, of course, some little chip damage against the battleship. This is the kind of stat line that indicates an impactful, successful game in an Italian destroyer. Your damage is going to be on opposing destroyers and submarines almost exclusively, and those will probably be a lot of kills. Okay, so just playing an Italian destroyer kind of requires you to have a slightly different approach to the game and a slightly different mindset. All right, ladies and gentlemen, there she is, Tier 6 Italian destroyer Aviere. I hope you were able to learn something a little bit from the video and the sample gameplay. You guys have any questions, comments, concerns, complaints, whatever, come on into the comments down below. Leave me your thoughts, and I will catch you next time. All right, peace, be safe.